Welcome to the Training Ground Guru podcast in association with Huddle. In every episode, we bring you insights into the teams behind the teams in professional football. Coming up on today's episode.
I've never seen someone who's a quick learner as Erling. The way he adapts these things from the training to the game, the transfer, and even the understanding of these things is just, it's a very underrated and hidden quality from him, because he's always described as this very physical striker, but he's a very smart guy.
I'm Simon Austin from Training Ground Guru, and this is the second part of my interview with Rene Maric. In this section, Rene talks about how a tactics blog provided an unusual launchpad for his coaching career, about his time at Borussia Dortmund and Leeds United, and about what it was like to work with Jude, Bellingham and Erling Haaland. We hope you enjoy it. Hello, Rene. Thank you for joining us for the second part of the podcast.
Pleasure to be back and then continue very left.
Yeah, so a lot has actually happened since we spoke yesterday evening. Thomas Tuchel has been announced is going to be stepping down as Bayern manager at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting decision because the club in the end decided quite in advance now to make the change at the end of the season, and will be interesting in terms of how the players will adapt to it and how we'll be able to still play to our best until the end of the season, and then the transition period will be very interesting.
And will this affect your position at the club, Rene?
No, that's not related to it at all. So my position will stay the same.
I wondered if you might be involved in the first team, possibly, after this.
I wouldn't bet on that.
We'll wait and see.
Let's wait and see. I wouldn't bet on it.
Just a final one on this news today. What's the atmosphere been like around the club today?
Obviously, because the club is so big, these things are... everyone is discussing these things. From the outside, everyone is discussing Bayern Munich and... in the whole world, but especially around here, and everyone has their say. Everyone has their guesses, and in the end, for me personally, I'm the opposite. When these things happen, it's part of the business, sadly, and it's part of how these things happen. But my work is focused on my team and on my job, and so for me, I'm maybe, even if I'm quite involved in everything and integrated in the club, for me, it's probably less of a topic for today or for these days than for most people, because again, it's Bayern. It's just such a big club. It's such a huge fan base that everyone is discussing all the small things about the club anyways. And when a big thing like this happens, it's like a shockwave, and everyone engages in these discussions. Everyone wants to know something. And for me, it's like, I have to plan my training and plan my meetings.
And I was going to spin right back to the start of your career. And you've actually known Thomas Tuchel for a long time, haven't you?
Yes, that's actually true. We met, I think, 12 years ago the first time, and had a lunch at the stadium from Mainz. And we discussed a little bit of football, and we had a very small, just like a consultancy from our side with the staff of Mainz for, I think, a bit over a season. And it's a long time ago. I was very young back then. But it was like the first time that I really had the feeling that these things that I was thinking about also happened on top level in a similar manner. And I'm obviously grateful that he in some way gave me a confirmation of some things, and then the motivation to continue in some paths. And obviously, especially back then, but even now, I think is a big role model for a lot of coaches in the German-speaking countries because of his background. And it was really nice and a great thing for him to do to reach out back then to us.
And how was it that he'd found out about you?
He read analysis from a game against Bayern, actually, Mainz Bayern, on our blog, and he seemed to like it. And he seemed to find it interesting, and also that it was pretty accurate. So that's what he said. And Then his staff reached out to us per mail, invited us, and when we met, he was also sitting at the table, and it was the staff, and it was us, and we were just talking for a bit, and then they showed us around the stadium and everything. We discussed some trainings, some games, some teams, and some opinions, and we had a great experience. For us, it was a really big thing.
And I almost think describing it as a blog doesn't do it justice, really, because you're talking about, if I got it, Spielverlagerung.
It's not as easy to pronounce, right? Spielverlagerung. No. It just means switch of play, or also changing the game in some way. So, yeah, Spielverlagerung.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that help. Because I first became aware of it more than 5 years ago, and I read a very, very good piece. I think it became quite a famous piece about the half spaces. And it was a very in-depth analysis of this tactical concept. And it did become a famous website, didn't it, really, among fans, but also people working in the game?
Yeah, you could say that. It was surprising because obviously we were just some young coaches and people talking about the game. And I was an amateur coach, amateur youth coach, actually, back then, taking the under-11s back then. It was after school. I was in the Austrian army for a few months, and we just started to discuss it. Like, we just couldn't just put our opinions together and people feedback it, just so we get some feedback and learn and meet other people. So it was more like starting out as a way of writing things down to, in some way, being able to feedback ourselves and get feedback on it. And we thought back then people will not really be interested, and that was never neither an issue nor a topic nor a goal from us. We just wanted to talk about the game. And when we saw that people are interested, we went into more detail and we went into more discussions. And from that, I think it developed that it was having a small hype back then in Germany, people quoting it in German media, some coaches, some players mentioning it when they were, or former players actually back then. And so we got a niche and following. And from that, the amount of readers got bigger. We got some consultancy projects. We basically had more than one pillar. So I wrote a book with another guy who was like a guest writer on our blog, I'd say. We wrote theory articles. We wrote match analysis, team analysis, play analysis, just like whatever we thought is interesting, or maybe for some readers ask for, just to delve more into the game and then put out something that gets us some feedback and meet other people. So some of the guys who write for it were readers, and it was never planned as anything, neither journalistic nor PR, nothing. Just writing about the game. And as I said already, that if you cannot explain it simple enough, then you maybe don't understand it fully. And we sometimes made it harder to understand and made it harder to read because we didn't understand it. But that was also the reason why we did it, just to get some feedback and improve from there and go from there. And yeah, it was funny times because through these consultancy projects and through the networking and through meeting different coaches, people even working for some FAs and in different countries, continents, something you never experienced. That was basically my work when I studied, because others have to be working as a waiter or whatever, and I was able to just meet people, talk about football, write about football, and that was obviously a big luxury, and it helped me because I started coaching half a year before we started Spielverlagerung, and it was like going parallel. I was doing things on the pitch, and then I also did things in a more theoretical, academical way, and they're just trying through the years to make that difference smaller and smaller through more understanding.
No, it's really interesting. So you were at the academy at RB Salzburg at the time that you were producing the blog?
Actually, when I went to Salzburg, I stopped writing. So it was more or less from 2011 to 2016. And when I went to Salzburg and I signed a full-time contract as assistant manager of the under-18s, where we also had the under-19s in the youth league and under-17s for these type of tournaments, I basically stopped writing for Spielverlagerung because of conflict of interest in some way, but it's mainly because of time issues. So the club was open that I can do it, but I just focused on being on the pitch and doing the stuff that we did in Salzburg, the academy for that 1 year that I was there.
And I know someone, I don't know if you know him, called Alex Clapham, he's got a platform called Cano Football. And it's a cool platform, actually. He'll visit clubs around Europe and he talks about what they're doing with coaching, training, tactics. And he said it's been very, very good CPD for him. But then it's also become very popular as well. So I was wondering, did it help your career a lot, do you think, doing Spielverlagerung?
As you can imagine, I know Alex's blog, and I still try whenever I have time to read different blogs. I'm very lucky that because of Spielverlagerung, because of meeting people, very often I have to search for myself, but like people read interesting stuff and they send me the most interesting things, and I still try to catch up because I think it just still tries to keep your perspective wide. And obviously it helped me because I've met Marco through it. I got the Red Bull job in some way because of that. Marco was a former player of Thomas, and he heard of the blog and of me, and it was just a lucky coincidence. He was coaching at Salzburg and I was studying there, and we met, and I was having my amateur team here, and we started to talk football. And from there, after a few months of talking, he was open to, because his assistant coach until then basically took a role to be the coordinator for under 7 to under 14. He's now the sporting director of Salzburg. So he went his way in that pathway, and I've become his successor as Marco's assistant coach. And it helped me a lot because I probably would be coaching in amateurs football instead of having experienced Premier League and Champions League. Also, that experience helped me in that regards, but it helped me even more in just getting a lot of feedback, meeting a lot of people that are giving me feedback, that help me with discussions, that shared information, content, knowledge with me, and helped me to improve because they were open with their feedback, but also with their knowledge. So in terms of creating a network of people who are just interested in football and talk about football, it was a blessing in disguise because, again, it wasn't really planned in that way, but it helped me a lot, and it was part of my journey as a coach at the start. And it still carries me in terms of being always open to anyone, really. Like, it doesn't matter what's the name, but like just being open to feedback and to information, and then also still being open to reflect it for yourself, and then trying to deliberately take the best things out of it.
We get asked by a lot of coaches whether they should do social media, whether they should produce content. So what do you think about that? Because you're someone who's benefited a lot from that by the sounds of it.
It sounds strange, possibly, but I'm a bit more an old school guy, to be honest. If I would not be in that job, I would have no social media presence. Because I'm in the job, I have to, but it's not like I'm not really regularly posting. I use Twitter because you have really the chance to get a good bubble where you can find a lot of information, different topics. You can follow people who have an academic background and skill acquisition. You can follow coaches. You can follow analysts. You can follow blogs. You can follow whatever. So that's really, really interesting. And I have it more for the sake of being informed and not someone else taking my liking, but I'm a passive consumer, and when I find time, I do it. And actively, I just do it when when I get asked for, I don't know, an update or people telling me to do something on it. But it's not my strong side. I prefer being in the meeting room, in the pitch, and in the office, because I think that's where the actual work is done, and not on social media.
And did writing the articles help you really kind of think about your principles and your coaching ideas and your tactics? Did that help a lot?
Yes, because it helped me get feedback, and honestly, sometimes it just show me how stupid I sound. Like, in your head, you sound much better than if it's written down. Or sometimes you think you have a lot of ideas, and then you write it down, it's half a page, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's not as much as I thought. So it's like a mirror. It shows you, it humbles you, because sometimes you just write stupid stuff, or you think you have more in your head, or it's not formalized. So just to create content and being self-critical and making that content clearer and concise. Sometimes I'm embarrassed how long it took, but I think it was helpful in just putting my thoughts down and then being critical about them, and also in a way reading how it would sound, and trying to accept that, and then trying to make that better. I think that was something that it helped me to improve on, and until today it's more like a mindset that whenever I like to film the meetings if it's possible, and then revise it and see, and just like you do video analysis with a player, right? Or also like you do training with a player, then it's a good tool. And I think that openness and that way of thinking about yourself is probably the thing that stayed the most with me from the time.
And you were talking about Marco Rose, who you met while you were at Salzburg. Did you get on straight away, you two, and did you have very similar ideas about the game?
Yes and no. I think I liked him more at the start than he liked me, which is fine. He's a bit older than me. I think it's basically exactly 16 years. And I think in terms of our background, that he came from the club school of thought, because obviously he was his coach, and Marcus is a great manager. And then being Red Bull Prime, where I, in some way with the blog, but even more of my amateur team, I had to create my own idea from scratch. Then obviously it is very authentic, and it stayed the same until today in its core, but you make a lot of mistakes. And obviously, like that Red Bull education, it helps you to quickly negate some mistakes that you do. Whereas when I was with my amateur team, I did some mistakes and I didn't even realize, because I had not too much to reflect on. And from there, I think it was really good how we started to convert some ideas, to discuss some ideas, for me to get a mirror, to get feedback from someone who has a different type of experience, and also from my side for him to give some feedback to what he's already doing, but also try to get some new input, always having that idea, okay, I'm here to maybe change some things up and to maybe give some different type of input and create some different type of output. And sometimes he would just say no. And very often he was also right at that moment to say no. But it was a really enjoyable, great time where I hope that he also learned something, but I think, and I can say that I obviously learned a lot of things, and it was also very good for me, not just because of the discussion and these things, but mainly because he allowed me to do so much. So to do meetings in front of the team, to do individual meetings without him, to be part of individual talks, which are not just like content, but like leadership management, to be part of that. So in that regards, he helped me so much, and I'm really grateful, because I think it's not usual that as a very young assistant coach, you're more or less taking on the journey fully in all these things. Even when we met with clubs, to be part of that is not always normal, and it's something that I'm very grateful for, because he gave me experience that you cannot get as easily and as quickly normally.
Mm. And we hear a lot about the Red Bull approach, and Ralph Hasenhüttl, Ralf Rangnick, Jesse Marsch. It's been very influential in many countries. Were you always aware of that Red Bull approach, and is that something that is kind of really imposed on you centrally when you're at one of the clubs?
It was imposed on me both in terms of the category, the drawer that I'm put in, but also in terms of my personal CV and my development and my education. I started to be a coach more or less before that Red Bull style became a Red Bull style. So obviously it existed before with Rangnick and with his mentor Helmut Goos, but like the way it is now, you could say it's maybe since 10 years with Roger Schmidt and with the Red Bull Salzburg development. And in some way, I was already a coach back then and had my own ideas, and they were shaped very much by a young coach who's a fan of football, by some players that I liked and some coaches that I liked, which were Van Gaal at Bayern Munich, which was Pep, which was Klopp. So obviously you look at them and you look at their teams and you're like, oh, I would like my team to play like this, and then trying to find a way to apply this on amateur and youth amateur and adult amateur level. And then I went to Red Bull, and then I got a more professional way of talking about the game, and especially the transition phases and the against the ball phase. And I always say that it helped me a lot in terms of improving things that I would have probably not looked at especially not in that way back then. So it helped me so much in getting a clear structure in these things and just adapting my way on the knowledge and the experience that they gathered over all these years and collected at the Red Bull education. But in the end, I think everyone has to have their own idea. It might differ stronger or less strong in some phases, but some things, some convictions, they have to stay with you because they are the core beliefs of how you see the game. And these things developed before my time at Red Bull with the amateur team. And then by Red Bull, some of these things became stronger, some became better, and some changed, some didn't change.
And we had Ruben Selles on the pod, Southampton manager, a couple of episodes ago, and he was saying what's very useful about having this Red Bull philosophy is you can be very clear in your recruitment of coaches and players if you're so clear about the way you want to play and the characteristics you're looking for.
I think it's not just in recruitment in general, but it's a point that often gets related to Red Bull, but it's just a general point in life. If you have a principle, then your process can follow easier. If you have a reference, then you have something a target to strive to, a goal to achieve. And I think that makes you clear which intentions you should have, and that helps you to have the right behaviors. And just in the end, it's identity, it's culture. And that's something that, for me, again, I started to develop in my personal way when I was an amateur coach, based on my beliefs about the game, and honestly, just things that I liked, things that I like to watch, things that I like to see from players, from teams, and trying to make sense of it, trying to put it into words. And again, it's something embarrassing and funny how long it took to put it into the right words and in simple words. But the core belief in terms of how I feel about the game and how I feel about how a game of football should look and the team should look and the player should look is stayed over all these years. And then again, if you have that clear idea, no matter if it's called Red Bull or a different name put on it, like think Barca under Pep, where they had so many La Masia graduates, I think in general that's identity and culture that helps you align all the processes in a club.
How would you describe the Red Bull style of play?
Oh, it's just trying to attack from every game, because that's literally the definition they have. They just try to be very on the front foot, very early pressing, very early trying to progress play with the ball, very fast in both things, very direct in both things, very high up the pitch. And that's the idea. And obviously a lot of teams try to press. I think what Red Bull does a bit stronger and more than others that try to press in that way is how they do it together, how extreme they do it, how they try to create an overload on the ball, not just around the ball, but literally on the ball to create a 2-against-1 situation for the ball carrier to win the ball. And then the type of transitions that you do not do these things with man marking, but that you're more oriented with the ball and your teammate. And then the opponent is like the third reference point. I think there's some details that you can do. And again, there are teams that pressed very high, teams that pressed very well in the history of the game. You can mention teams like Feyenoord for Verstappen, Saki Milan, you have Lobanovsky's Dynamo Kiev, who maybe did it a bit deeper, but very coordinated. You have a lot of teams for history that have tried to do it, the Netherlands and Ajax under Michels. And then I think that's Red Bull, the way they do it is a bit more extreme, more structured, obviously, because that's the natural progression of knowledge and of education. And that's what makes them unique. And that's probably how I describe them, this type of how extreme you are in terms of putting pressure early, how many players you use, how focused you are on that phase of play.
Our podcast sponsor, Huddle, offer exclusive video and data from the best youth football competitions in the world with Y-Scout youth competitions. From under 14s to 21s, scout the best talent playing in the major youth football competitions around the globe. Make the correct scouting decisions with objective data from over 70 competitions, 900 teams, and 11,000 players. For more information, go to huddle.com/TGG/Y-Scout.
And you had a lot of success, yourself and Marco Rose, very quickly. So Salzburg on to Borussia Monchengladbach, and then Borussia Dortmund, one of the biggest clubs in Germany and also Europe.
Yeah.
What was that like as a young man? Because you were in your 20s.
Yeah. So when I went to the under 18s, where we won the youth league in our first season, and then went to the professional, I was 23 years old. And then we played in the Europa League semifinals, won the title. The next year we won the double, and again played in the Europa League, playing against some great teams. For instance, Inzaghi's Lazio was something that really stayed with me. You go to Gladbach, the club that I really, really, really like, just as a club, with the people there, it stays in my heart. And from there we adapted. We adapted from the start, even at the under 18s. We adapted some things from the Red Bull styles through our discussions. We adapted in the first team. We adapted to Gladbach and to their culture. We tried to make some of these things we think is non-negotiable for top level. We have the stuff that you could say is like the heritage of Gladbach as a club, with Weisweiler in the far past and the near past with Lucien Favre. And we tried to adapt this together with the players, and I think we had the great 1.5 year there. And then obviously we didn't end the season on as well as we wanted to, and we left Dortmund, where I really saw some amazing players, and then just in general the whole journey. Every club was different. Every club was something that I can take pride in working there, and then where I learned a lot and where I saw some things in a different light, in a different perspective. So that's a really, really big privilege to be working there together with Marco, and also to follow not just my journey, but also being able to be part of his journey and follow him through all these years and see how he adapted to different things, how he coped with different things, and trying just to learn from it from myself.
And I know in Germany they have this phrase laptop coaches, and I guess you were kind of at the vanguard of that, really. Is that a description you like?
Honestly, all these things, all these cliche stereotypes, I don't care. Like, if they want to call me like that, it would be pretty stupid to nowadays if you do not use a laptop, because it makes things much easier, especially if you have to organize a lot of stuff. Like right now as an under-19s coach, it'd be pretty hard without a laptop to make it work. It would be a lot of paperwork and would be pretty hard, but if people want to use it in any way they can do it. It's a pretty good tool. Just like the cones on the pitch are a pretty good tool, the laptop in the office is also a pretty good tool.
Yeah. And you were working with some incredible players during that time as well. People like Erling, Haaland and Jude, Bellingham, who are now superstars of the game.
It's an honor to work with players like this. I had so many great players. It started already with the under 18s, where I had Szoboszlai at Salzburg in the youth. Then you have some players that are maybe not as famous, but where I had a lot of fun working with them. Some players that are really tied to my heart because of their character, of the experience that we had, of the bond that we maybe created, and the relationships that we had. And then obviously you have you mentioned these two. They're probably the singular mix of all these things, players that I really had a good bond with, a great relationship on the pitch in terms of working individually with them, of talking with them, of learning from them too. Because obviously you can, from these type of players, you can just learn that you can give to other players. Great personalities and amazing world-class players who are just also they're quite popular. So they fulfill all of these things, but there are also other players that I really enjoyed and loved working and still in touch until today. And there are some names that might pop up in a few years. There are some names that again might not be as popular outside of the clubs they're at, or Germany, but it was a lot of fun. It was a privilege to have so many different types of personalities and players in my career.
Have you been surprised at what an immediate impact Szoboszlai has made at Liverpool? How good he's been so quickly?
No. I'm not, because we always knew that he is a tremendous talent, and it's just up to him how consistently he's able to apply it. And then I think when I saw him develop from when he was 16 years old to the later stages when he was joining us back at the first team at Salzburg, I think you could see that there's unbelievable potential. I think just in terms of shooting football, he's maybe the best in the world, or at least up there. And if he's able to get into these positions and then also fulfill these other tasks, and he has that ability, that capacity, he's a tremendous player.
I suppose it's no coincidence as well that Liverpool have signed so many players from the Red Bull group with the similarities and style.
Like I mentioned when I started coaching, obviously it was a lot of Pep and Van Gaal, but also Klopp. And I think Klopp also already had that similarities to that Red Bull style that developed in these years, where it's just about also dominating the ball when you do not have it, dominating the game when you do not have the ball. And then in the same way, being able to score goals from transitions. The counter press, obviously the gegenpress, as it's called, very often goes back. In terms of becoming popular to Klopp, it wasn't invented by him, but I think the way he uses it, the way he addresses it, the way he coaches it, makes it maybe very connected to him, and especially the word too. So the similarities are there, and then it makes sense to scout in these clubs where you can see these similarities and then maybe pick the ones that suits you the best. It's pretty smart.
Yeah. And Dortmund has become a very popular, probably the most popular stepping stone club, you could call it. So players go there before their huge move to Real Madrid or Manchester City. Is it a real learning environment then? How do they do that so well?
I think the main thing they do so well is that they are able to get the top talents, because it's a big club with a big fan base, so it's very attractive for the top talents. I think everyone in Europe with more than one scout in the club knew who Jude Bellingham is. But obviously, if you have that mixture of being a big club and still being able to give him consistent minutes and promise him that he'll be able to play, I think that just convinces these top talents to go there. And then if you give them minutes, very often if there is enough support from the staff, these players will progress through these games, because they're high-level games in a high-level environment. And I think that's the main part of it.
Would there be a lot of one-on-one work with players like Haaland and Bellingham when you were there?
It depended a bit on the schedule, and it depended on ways. So sometimes you do more in just talking about the training and about the games on the pitch. Sometimes you do some top-up things. Sometimes when Erling was at Salzburg, you do a lot of individual training, because he came with not a simple injury to us, which wasn't dangerous, but that didn't permit him to go 100% at the first weeks and months. So I had the pleasure that basically I was taking over in these days where he had to do it without the team, or where he couldn't play, and then he was basically in individual training for a day. So that was really, really enjoyable. But mostly, if you play so many games and you don't want to overload these young players who are still carrying so much responsibility and quality, then it's about just talking with them through the games, through the trainings, and keep them on the right track. But to be honest, with these two guys, that's a pretty self-regulated task, right?
What sort of work would you do with them on the training pitch on a one-on-one basis?
Yeah, it depended a bit on what happened in the last game, also on their wishes. I always believe that if the player has a wish and a conviction that he wants to improve on something, it's always very good to listen to the players and to hear his thoughts, and then try to help him in what he wants to be better at. But also with Erling, what we did was a lot of movement in the gaps of a back four in different situations of the game, depending on where the ball position is. If you look at his games, maybe the easiest example is if the ball is, you mentioned it, the right half space with a player like De Bruyne, what's the best position and angle to then maybe be able to receive a ball? What happens if the ball moves and then you have to relocate? What happens if the ball breaks through? What is the type of run? What are the reference points for your perception? But again, I think I've said it already before, I've never seen someone who's a quick learner as Erling. The way he adapts these things from the training to the game, the transfer, and even the understanding of these things is just, it's a very underrated and hidden quality from him, because he's always described as this very physical striker, but he's a very smart guy.
Yeah. Where do you think that comes from, that ability to learn so quickly and to implement so quickly?
Yeah, I think if you have a father who keeps you on the right path, if you have that character he has, he was not an early bloomer, from what I gathered. If you stay at your hometown club, if you have that eagerness to improve, I think that comes with it. And obviously I met his father and know him, and I think he just, that was just in terms of the family, the whole environment, his character, the character surrounding him. I think that was just very helpful to make him who he is today. And you can always look for improvements, but in the end, he's the same. At least from what I know, he's the same guy as he was when I met him years ago.
And is that something you noticed with Bellingham as well, that eagerness to learn?
Yes. Like that eagerness to improve, to win, to work on yourself without changing yourself. Like that mixture is something that I think, even if they're very different types of players, that really connects them and connects to some other players that I really enjoyed working with in my career.
And after Dortmund, you went on to Leeds United. How did that move come about?
Somewhat surprisingly, we left Dortmund at the end of the season, and I've never met Jesse before, but he was our successor at RB Salzburg. And from what I've gathered, a lot of the stuff that I've left there in terms of we created, because every time we left the club, I would offer the club to leave everything that I or we produced at the club. And I think he saw some of the work that we did before. I guess he liked it. And he probably also heard that like I was always trying to give new ideas and feedback and criticism to Marco. And when I was free and he needed an assistant manager, it was probably short ways of communication to get my number and to reach out. And we had then talks for some weeks in terms of the role, the alignment, and these things. And then in the end, I thought like Leeds is such a big club, but the Premier League is the biggest league in the world. And I thought, just why not try something else, try something different, see a different head coach, get experience in the best league against the best opponents in the world. And then again, Leeds is a huge club. Really like the fan base, but also the people there, stuff, and then the players. It's amazing. Like I think what Bielsa left there in terms of that eagerness to work, to be able to take over from that and become part of that culture and learn from it was something that I really don't take for granted.
And Victor Orta, who was the sporting director of Leeds, now at Sevilla, he's also been on the podcast before. He's another one. And I know he was very, very confident that Jesse Marsch would be a good transition from Bielsa. He saw a lot of similarities in the style of play and the characteristics, but it just didn't work out, did it really? Why do you think that is, looking back?
Look, I think just statistically from what I've gathered, like the running data from Jesse's teams and Marcelo's teams, the speed of play in both phases, that eagerness to press high, the way they transitioned, I think statistically looked very, very similar. So for Victor, from what I've gathered, what he told me, that was like a natural fit in terms of like if you just overlay it, it was very similar. And then also having a young squad of some rebuild in that summer. I think the idea was to have a coach who has a track record of developing talent in his career, that this was the idea. And in the end, in terms of why it didn't work out, it's always not easy to say. There are things that you can say, like the expected goals numbers, that they were better than the results show. And I think in terms of the absolute amount of running and sprinting, we were still top 3 in the league. But in terms of the net per minute, we were actually still above Newcastle. So that Bielsa intensity actually kept. It just was at the net playing time against Leeds. Everyone tried to get breaks in, which also doesn't make it easy to play that style consistently. I think 3 clubs were the only one who had a positive net spend, and they were Leicester, Leeds, and City. City obviously won everything, and Leeds and Leicester got relegated. But I think in the end, you can always use these things as factors and try to explain stuff. But it didn't work out. I can just talk about myself, and I'm quite honest. There are things that I, in retrospective, would have liked to do better. I think that would have deserved to be better in my role. From my perspective, I would have loved to be able to do more. I had the feeling I did try, obviously, to do my best. I wasn't able to do that. And in the end, after I got fired, I went to the next 2 games and was in the stands. And I still really enjoyed the club. I learned to really like the people from Yorkshire. And I've met some great people. I'm still in touch with some of them. I think that the staff, the locker room is good. It's great. And I think in that phase, there was also some turmoil in terms of the higher-ups, because obviously, and that's not a criticism anyway, it's just normal. Like if you're selling a club, if you're in the process that every decision has an additional point of discussion, do you want to do it now? Do you do it later? And then things can get slower, and that's normal. That's part of just the situation and not necessarily the people. And it's just sad that in the end, such a historically big club with a great fan base, in the end, couldn't make it through the season. And I'm still very disappointed that it didn't work out, because I still obviously, not just in contact with a lot of people, I track every result. I was in touch with the new coaching staff, giving some feedback and ideas and wishing them luck. And I think they're doing a great job for a great team.
What would you have liked to have done more of? Do you mean on the training pitch?
No, just in terms of the way I worked my role. I think in the end, I would have liked to do it better. There obviously are always reasons for these things, but again, I always like to talk about things that that are about me. And I think if I would be able to redo it, there are some things that I would like to have maybe done differently, addressed differently, worked differently, just for myself and from my own perspective. I think I didn't do the job that I wanted to do, sadly.
And did that give you an appetite to work in England again? Because I look and your name is often linked with jobs when they come up, in the Championship particularly.
Yeah, I mean, the football culture is amazing there. I think it's very important, and it's very helpful that I've learned some things when I was there, because I think if you come to a club, country, whatever, you have to adapt to it. You have to understand the culture. You have to adapt to it. And then obviously from understanding that, you can try to have success with your way. But the starting point is not yourself. The starting point is the culture and the intention of the club, the culture of the country, the demands of the league. And to be able to understand that, I think is a very big key learning for me. And I really, really was positively surprised about a lot of things. And I would really like to work there, because I think in the end, the Prem is the biggest league in the world, and the Championship is such a great league with so many different teams, obviously, because there are many different teams. But like, if you just go through the ranks, so many historical teams, great games, great fan bases, a tough league with very specific demands, and it's just a great challenge.
And what are your ambitions for the future? Do you want to be a head coach?
So yeah, I'm a head coach now in the under-19s. So I was a head coach.
I was senior.
I was a head coach at the amateur level, and before, and I always. Even when I became an assistant when I was very young, for me it was always to learn things, which was helpful, because I always knew even then that I want to be back as a head coach after I did my learning as an assistant. So I would always not just reflect things that happen, but I would reflect them in a way where I think, okay, if I was a head coach, I would have do it. Do I understand why Marc is doing it? And then I would ask him questions, and I would always have it in mind that in the midterm future, I want to be a head coach again, like I was on amateur level, and I can use this as an opportunity to improve and not just be part of the journey, but actually reflect on that journey in a very specific way, in terms of, if I was put on the spot, how would I react? If I was put on the spot, how did he react? Why is there difference? And then just talk with him. And he was always, and again, that's why I'm so grateful. He was always very open, and some things I've learned from him, and some things maybe I disagreed with him, and we discussed it, and I learned something from the discussion, and maybe I still decided that I would do some things in my way because I think, again, you have some convictions, some beliefs, some non-negotiable things. And for me, it was always that intention from the start with using that journey to just, go on a journey that's very, very special with working with these players and in these leagues, but with the intention that one day I want to be a head coach again. And now, because of these circumstances here, I accepted that head coach position until summer to just help the club, the players, and in the end, I know the type of guy I am. Even at the amateur level, I just love being on the pitch. So it's amazing. I have a lot of fun, and I just can feel that that's the right step, and just now to find the right club for the next step.
And are you still fascinated by tactics? So going all the way back to Spielverlagerung, what tactics are you interested in? Yeah.
Tactics don't exist. Like you have decisions of players, and tactics just mean just the word people use to influence these decisions. But I want to improve their understanding of the game. So if there's no goalkeeper, you would obviously try to score. And that's a very extreme example. But if you get pressed from the right, you cannot run through the opponent. You have to get around him. It might be the right touch past him. It might be a pass. It might be that you adapt your position before. So there are some tools and some ideas that I developed in terms of calling these things in a simple way and teaching them. But in the end, I see my role as a head coach, as a manager, that I want to influence and improve the decision making of the players. And I think the word tactics is very confusing, actually, because what's strategy, what's tactics, and people use it, and then you talk and then it's the other way around, or it's that, which is fine. I accept everything, but for me, it's very clear that I always want to work from the player, and then it's about the decision making, and in a way to align the decision making of 11 players to know if this happens, what's the role of each other. And that relates to the opponent. Obviously, there's some adaptation, but in the end, there's some things that are, no matter where you play, might be the different space and time that you need or that is in front of you, but some situations, some actions are the same everywhere in the world. And that was a big, big part of my personal journey to that feeling that I always had to put into words, to make it more concise, to slim it down, to basically the most important things about the game.
Because we do see some very interesting innovations, don't we, which always capture people's imagination. So I'm thinking things like the relationism in Brazil with the defending. I
think when we talked about the Red Bull pressing style, I mentioned it a little bit, like you have these 3 reference points of the ball, the teammate and the opponent. And then when you first look at the opponent against the ball, like defensively, you would call it man marking. If you're looking first at your teammate, you call it zonal marking. And then if you're looking first at the ball, people would call it pressing. And it doesn't matter how you call it. And if you have these distinctions against the ball defensively, why would you not have them offensively? And if you then want to call it positional play or relationism and put them against each other, for me, that's a discussion that I like to read because I can reflect on it. But the moment you go away from these reference points, for me, you can use it because I think it's useful to discuss and to reflect, but it's not something that's, for me, important for the players. So for me, it's good as an exercise for myself and reflect on things and learn. But in the end, I always tie it back to what are the important information and the actual relevant things on the pitch for the players. So that's how my thinking was shaped the last years.
And I was talking to a very, very good coach educator today called Brian Ashton. And he was saying he thinks sometimes tactics can be restrictive because they're stopping the players thinking for themselves on the pitch.
Yeah, that's another reason why I only think about from the player's perspective and in terms of the decision making. Because if you get pressed from the outside, there is space in behind that, but you might have to go inside in one way or the other to get to that space that the opponent opened. And then if you want to make it with formations and everything, yes, but you might make it harder to grasp, and then you maybe need half a second longer, and then you might not be able to execute that decision, or you might make the wrong decision. So it's a matter of the quality of explanation And I think it helps with the quality explanation if you focus on the eyes and the head and the legs of the players, and teach the game and not teach your personal favorite style or language or whatever.
And just a final question, Rene, and you've touched on it quite a bit already, but what type of a head coach would you be? So I'm thinking in terms of playing principles and also leadership and man management.
Sometimes, because now you could delve into discussions about any single little thing, but it's maybe easier to say the teams that I really love to watch. And I think if you obviously in the last years, that rivalry between Liverpool and Man City, very often people would side one way or the other. In terms just of who I like to watch, so don't take it as a judgment of other coaches or that coach or that team or whatever, but like the team that I like to watch the most is Arsenal. I really enjoy watching their games. And then you have a lot of other fantastic teams. Obviously, Man City is amazing. You have Liverpool, a lot of teams in the Prem. Inter with Inzaghi, you have a lot of great teams in the Bundesliga and in the top three. You have three amazing teams. You have Brighton, but like if you would ask me if I could wish for my team to play like a single team, I might actually choose Arsenal, because I think that mixture of what I mentioned, to be able to play a specific style with the ball and against the ball, I think they just fulfill it in a way that I think is very attractive, and that is very obviously not easy to create, and it takes some time. And I really enjoy watching them. And I think if you go back last season, the Championship, Swansea with Russell Martin and then Burnley with Vincent, they were really good to watch too. So you have these teams on any level. Ipswich, the last 2 seasons is a tremendous job by McKenna. So that type of football in general. And if you ask me for a very specific iteration, I might just go with Arsenal.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time, Rene.
Thank you for taking time to talk with me. And I don't know how much will be in the end in the podcast, but I think it's pretty... If you talk with me about football, it can be quite time consuming, right?
Thank you for listening to the Training Ground Guru podcast in association with Huddle. We'll be back next month with another episode. In the meantime, you can follow our latest updates on the website and on Twitter @ground_guru.